Thank you very much, John. Good evening, everyone. This is a rather oddly laid out classroom. In any other circumstances, I would say, well, the boys and girls who are hiding up the back, just come down this way, please. My task is to throw down a gauntlet, it's described as, that hopefully Alex and Frank, from different perspectives, will subsequently pick up. How do people learn? What makes a good childhood? What do young people have to have experienced and be able to do if they're to thrive in the rapidly changing world that we inhabit? These seem to be good and fundamental questions, and questions that we have neither, for the most part, asked nor answered when thinking about school design. If we were designing an education system from scratch, knowing what we now know about the way the brain works, sensing the possibilities of ICT, perhaps understanding to some extent the way in which the future is likely to lead us, would we, starting from scratch, even come up with the concept of the school as we currently understand it at all? And yet, over the past few years, we have had the resources, we have had the opportunity to rethink. We also have in Scotland a new curriculum, new agreed purposes for education, new pedagogies. And what have we built? Essentially, variants upon school designs that could have gone up 30 or 50 years ago. Some of these designs are also, in the view of Audit Scotland in its report of a year or so ago, technically less than competent, and have failed to address, still less answer, the challenge of sustainability. But I'm not going to talk about those issues. The challenges that I want to throw down relate to two things only. Firstly, can we build schools that are not educationally obsolescent the day that they are opened? And secondly, can we build schools that underpin rather than undermine the values and importance of education? Now, I have to confess that I think the problem as we are experiencing it lies primarily with the educators, with people like Frank, myself, and others in the room, who are, for the most part, abysmal clients. No vision for the future, no grasp even of present-day possibilities. But I wouldn't like to let designers and architects entirely off the hook either, for they have failed to ask us the challenging questions. What has changed in the world outside that requires education to change? What opportunities do new thinking about education, new technologies in education offer that we should be taking into account? What kind of communities for young people are you expecting us to create in bricks and mortar? So here then is my first challenge. What kind of schools is it that we actually want? And to answer that challenge, we have to think about some more questions. What is our education system actually trying to achieve? What kind of buildings would actively help us to achieve it? What changes in the future should we be anticipating and seeking to accommodate? How can a genuinely 21st century sense of social and educational purpose be appropriately expressed in physical space? If we carry out that kind of fundamental rethink, it would be astonishing indeed if the answer to our questions were to be to revisit the design concepts of the mid-20th or even the late 19th century. Now, by all means, let us look backward. Let us see what we can in the buildings that have existed for some time. But we should not be looking to them for exemplars, but rather looking at them critically to see what are the design concepts they embody, and more significantly, what are the educational assumptions that underpin them. And we should be querying very actively whether those educational assumptions remain valid. So let's just spend a moment or two doing that. Our concept, and in many places our image, of the school is essentially a late 19th century one. It stems from the days when free and compulsory elementary education became available, following the 1872 Act in Scotland. The aim was very clear. It was the cost-effective delivery of a standardised service. And cost-effective delivery was to be ensured through the notion of the class unit, the age cohort, then of 40 or 50 children, now of perhaps generally half that. And that notion led to a very simple design brief. Lots of large, standard-sized, similarly equipped classrooms. A single space that served for physical education, or drill as it was then, religious assemblies and dining. No need for study facilities or social spaces. The hard playground with the outside toilets served well enough for that. A little accommodation for staff. Mass secondary education is a phenomenon of the 20th century. And with it came a philosophy very little altered from that of the elementary education of half a century earlier. Again, cost-effective service delivery was to the fore, and still is. There are very few technical instruments as surely optimised for maximum efficiency as the secondary school timetable, even as it stands today. But there were some new elements. A subject-divided curriculum, an element of choice, and with that came some further design implications. Pupil movement, involving greater circulation space. Specialist subjects involving specialist accommodation, although essentially still standard classrooms with some variation. But the age-related class unit remained the basis of organisation, and the delivery model remained firmly Fordist. Apart from Grangemouth, there are a few places in Scotland today where you can see a real large-scale industrial factory. So if anybody asks you, Danny, what does a factory look like? Probably in most localities the best place to take them to show them is the local secondary school. Equipped as it is, even with the hooter that signals the change of shift. But actually, our practice and philosophy has moved on a long way from there. Schools are kinder, more easygoing places. The voice of pupils is more loudly heard. Many of its activities are not of the standard classroom variety. Enterprise, multidisciplinary projects, health and well-being, and so on. Teachers are keen to embrace more active and more independent learning. But the buildings we have, and all too many of the buildings we have recently created, stand in the way of these things, rather than facilitating them. And if those are changes that are already well underway, what are the changes that we can easily anticipate? ICT, which is blurring the distinction between the school and the world beyond school, making learning an altogether more all-embracing concept, better suited to working as individuals and in small groups rather than in age-related herds. Personalisation, not just a matter of support for the individual, nor of choice, though these things are important. But again, questioning the way in which we group children, weakening the emphasis that we put on chronological age, maybe in the future involving the idea of anywhere, anytime learning. Our understanding of the learning process itself, our conviction that more active, more engaged, more customized learning is essential, our perception